Hello and welcome to Farm Journal Live. I'm editor Clint Griffiths, coming to you from our studios here in northern Indiana as we continue to celebrate Dairy Week. All things dairy in lieu of a canceled World Dairy Expo this week. And of course, if you'd like to join in all of the action, head over to dairyherd.com for the very latest of what's happening in Dairy Week. Let's get straight to some of the news today. More than 100 million food boxes have now been delivered to families needing assistance during the pandemic. That's according to an announcement from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. The Farmers to Family Food Box program purchases fresh produce, meat, milk, and dairy products to be included in food boxes distributed to food banks and other agencies. A third round of the purchases has been extended, and the program will run through this month. Joining us now, we have Michael Dykes. He's the president and CEO of the International Dairy Foods Association. Thank you for being here, Mr. Dykes. I appreciate that. And obviously, policy and what's going on as a safety net amid this pandemic has been a big focus for the dairy industry here lately.
Absolutely, Clinton. Big focus. The food box program, which you just talked about, it's been fantastic in terms of providing much needed food to the Americans that are food insecure, either because they lost their jobs or just a downturn in the economy from the lockdowns. But absolute kudos to the U.S. Department of Agriculture for their quick action to put together such a program. $4 billion through that for fruit, vegetables, dairy, and meat proteins. Phenomenal.
You know, it seems like it's been a big logistical project to be able to get dairy included in those boxes. Talk about that. What has that done for demand, and how has that supported our farmers who are out, creating this product each and every day?
Great question, Clinton. One of the directions that I received from our IDFA board of directors, our executive council, in the very beginning of this pandemic was to make sure that we had the food coming through the system all the way, the milk all the way from the dairy farm through the processor, so that we kept the milk flowing, we kept the processing plants open, we kept providing jobs for people working in those plants and on the farms, and most importantly, that we provided nutritious dairy products to those who most needed it. Didn't want the food stored for long-term storage because that puts a depressing effect on the dairy marketplace, but we wanted to purchase the foods and distribute it to Americans. And USDA did a great job of putting together the program so quickly. And to your point, this is the third round, which will be for September and October. And they just added another $1 billion to it.
Yeah. As we talk about some of the help that's gone out during this pandemic, obviously one of the things that we've been focused on here over the last week or two has been the CFAP 2.0 program that kind of covers that April 15th through the end of the year. It sounds like. What's your read on that and how that may impact the dairy industry?
Well, those are payments going to farmers. This is the second tranche. I think there was $16 billion in the first one, $14 billion in the second one for the sign-ups. It will certainly help farmers. They lifted the payment caps on those. I think those have been great programs. CFAP's an important thing. Benefited producers, not just dairy producers, row crop producers, livestock producers, and they just expanded in the second round to groups of producers that hadn't previously been able to participate. So it's aid that's much needed. For all of us in agriculture, Clinton, we're going to have to think about a time perhaps when there isn't as much government support as there has been for this farming year. If we look at this year, $37 billion all total of federal farm aid. Over a third of the total net farm income for this year is going to come from government payments. That's not sustainable for the future. As we have a farm bill coming in the next couple of years, we in food and agriculture are going to have to think about life returning to some semblance of normal in terms of cash receipts and those kinds of things.
I've been looking at those numbers here, something like $37 billion, right, is what we're talking about in direct payments, government support this year. Typically, that runs somewhere between 10 and 14, it seems like. And so as we start to talk about a new farm bill, are there things on your radar from a dairy perspective that maybe we can think about to preserve a safety net, but also do it in what is kind of a more normal environment?
Well, we're going to have to think about that in terms of fiscal, financial dollars. We're also going to think about that in terms of the policies, Clinton.
Mm.
Everyone that's listening is aware of the fact that we have a presidential election coming here in a matter of days. So who will be in the administration? What types of policy will they take toward food and agriculture? Who will be the Secretary of Agriculture? If we look at the House and the Senate, will Democrats remain in control of the House? If they do, 7 of the House Democrats are in what's called competitive toss-up races. Chairman of the House Ag Committee, Colin Peterson's done a fantastic job for production agriculture and all of food and agriculture, as he understands exactly what it takes to put the food on the table and have the food produced. Who's going to be making these decisions? And the same thing as we have retiring Senate Ag Committee Chairman Pat Roberts is going to be retiring, and Chairman Conaway just retiring. So there's going to be changes, and we're going to have to think about those from the policies perspective. And then the money is going to be another thing.
Right.
Where does the money come from? Because we're going to start here with high federal deficits, high total federal debt. Where does the money come from?
Well, and we're talking about, where does the money come from? Obviously, Congress today is kicking around another support program because of the pandemic with a pretty big ticket price. I mean, the last estimate was topping $1 trillion, somewhere in the neighborhood between $1 and $2 trillion. So what have you heard about that and how that may impact not only dairy but ag if that does get put together?
Clinton, that's a great point. Because things move so fast, and we talk about trillions in
Yes.
DC when most people are thinking about hundreds or thousands or maybe even stretched to billions. But we're talking about trillions here. The original House bill was $3.4 trillion. They carved a 1.2 off of it to make it a $2.2 trillion bill that they were planning to vote on yesterday. They've delayed that. Don't know how long, but they delayed it some because Speaker Pelosi and Treasury Secretary Mnuchin are talking. I understand in the last few hours, perhaps they're down. Mnuchin may be offering a $1.6 trillion package. And a lot of that is around how much do you pay for unemployment insurance? Maybe $400 instead of $600 a week. What do you do for state and local communities, aid there? So they're getting closer, 1.6 versus 2.2. I think the big question is, can they reach an agreement? And then probably even a bigger question is, will that, whatever agreement they reach, will that be acceptable to Senate leadership? So, and time is of the essence as well. So we'll see how all this comes together. For dairy, we like some provisions that are in the House, the current version of the House. One of those is a dairy recourse loan program that would provide up to $500 million for recourse loans that processors or merchandisers could use inventory to get a recourse loan so they could increase their working capital. As we get into times where receivables and different terms of previous sales are impacted, they could increase their working capital needs through a recourse loan program. Another provision is in there is around the dairy margin coverage and changing some of the premiums for dairy producers and reducing 15% reduction in premiums. We'd also like to see legislation included. It wasn't included because of cost, but we'd like to see something included for our essential workers, especially in the dairy industry, who showed up for work 3 shifts a day and kept put it on the shelves for consumers.
Yeah, interesting. As we talk about keeping food on the shelves, where do we sit with retail demand and some of the demand just from the general public and schools since this all started back in March? Or have we recovered in some of that, or we continue to see high retail demand, obviously changes and shifts from where the restaurant demand was? Where do we sit?
Well, one of the things that we're seeing is we've seen many bright spots in dairy, and we're very pleased with where we are. The progress that we have made as a dairy industry and how we've come together from the producer and processor perspective, we're seeing about a 10% increase in sales across all categories. It has been a growth story. Since 1975, we've seen a 21% increase in consumption of dairy products. We've helped manage the supply, we've helped manage the demand, and milk prices we're up near $20 on Class 3 prices. We've seen $2 cheese, we've seen $1 cheese, we've seen $3 cheese. So volatility has been extreme during this pandemic, but things are positive and things are looking good.
Well, very good, very good. Well, I appreciate you taking a few minutes to chat with us here on Farm Journal Live. Michael Dykes, President and CEO of the International Dairy Foods Association. Thank you so much, and we'll continue to follow these policy updates as they kind of emerge here over the coming hours and minutes, it seems like.
Thank you, Clinton. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for being with us. Now, this year has been anything but predictable, as Mr. Dykes mentioned, for dairy prices, especially between dumping milk and the pandemic and price recoveries. Ag Day National reporter Betsy Gibbon joins us now to look at where the industry sits now and what could still be to come.
For the dairy industry, how producers started the year is a drastic difference than where they're at now.
We took some protections early on in the market, as in last fall. And so we were able to weather a lot of what happened this year.
Rewind to earlier in the year, producers were forced to dump milk and prices crashed amid a global pandemic.
We went from comparing milk and cheese prices to what they looked like right after the global financial crisis to just a couple months later, looking at record cheese prices and incredibly strong milk prices.
Even now, prices for Class 3 are different.
I think our market prices are up at a level that is tolerable. I mean, it's maybe not as good as you'd want to have in what should have been a recovery year, but they aren't at unlivable levels.
There are a couple of reasons why. Stevenson says strong domestic demand through retail, good exports, and somewhat tighter milk supplies helps. The government stepping in, purchasing product with a cheese buying program. USDA also buying dairy for the Farmers to Families Food Box program, which has been extended.
Vendors are in place now up to 2022. So if USDA, if the administration decides that this is a good, easy way to support prices, we could see additional rounds into the winter or into next year.
The programs are helping soak up milk production, which is nearly 2% higher than a year ago. But there are some concerns how it impacts price.
And if we see production resuming at a 1.5 to 2% increase, somewhere in there, we're going to be in trouble with the price of milk.
This comes as the fate of the restaurant industry remains uncertain.
Once the government kind of steps away and stops injecting money into these food programs, we're not sure how we're going to soak up all of this excess product.
It could all impact price, but dairy producers are also getting government payments. One of them is CFAP, a second round announced by President Trump.
I think farmers will see an incredible amount of cash flowing into their checkbooks, whether that's from the CFAP payments, whether that's from dairy margin coverage, whether that is from, some hedging.
Badger says High Ground Dairy anticipates an average forecast for Class 3 milk prices throughout 2021 to be roughly $15.33 per hundredweight, with retail demand, exports, and government buying the wild cards. A year of a pandemic, buying, changes, and aid, not expected at the beginning of the year.
We've had such decreased income over the last 4 years that we needed a year like this to replace capital that's been worn out.
Reporting for Ag Day, I'm Betsy Gibbon.
Now, for more Dairy Week coverage, be sure you head over to dairyherd.com and sign up for Farm Journal's Dairy Week. There we'll have some featured events, including podcasts, ebooks, along with live and on-demand webinars or TV crews. We'll continue to focus on dairy all week. We've got one more day tomorrow morning on Ag Day. Make sure you join us. And this weekend, U.S. Farm Report will also be focused on dairy. Thanks again for watching Farm Journal Live. I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great afternoon.